The CEO is the only position in the company that doesn't have a job description. I was always struck when somebody would say, I don't know, that's not my job, talk to this person, that's the best person to talk to about that issue. When that comes from a CEO, it isn't shirking a responsibility. Largely, it is a sign of confidence and focus. The most effective CEOs do the things that they can do and no one else can do. It's not really about being trained and educated. It is really about finding the right time frame for the person to fit the right time frame for the position.
Good day, everyone. This is Dr. David Phelps of the Freedom Founders Mastermind Community and Dentist Freedom Blueprint Podcast. Today, we're going to have some fun and talk about the business ownership position, which we might also be called the CEO position, the C-suite level, something that many of us aspire to be. Many of us are maybe there out of default because someone had to fill that position, and we were the ones that decided to build the business because that's what was in our DNA. Today, someone who has really gone through all the different ascensions from starting out in that position of, hey, here's the business, take it by the reins and run it, to someone who has really ascended in many categories to be in a position where he leads today, not just his own teams, but is actually a keynote speaker in many different forums. And that is my good friend, Trey Taylor. Trey, how are you doing, sir?
David, I am well. Thanks for having me on this show. I listen to it anyway, but great pleasure to be with you today. Good to see you.
Well, giving you a little bit of your background, I alluded to it a little bit, but we're going to dig into that background and let you give us some of the specifics, because I think the story behind what got you to today, where you are now, is always interesting for all of us. It's never a straight shot. It's never what we thought, right? And it always comes with twists and turns, but many times those twists and turns can turn into something greater than we thought on the forefront. So today, Trey Taylor is a CEO. He's a mentor and coach to business owners and other CEOs. He has varied experience in tech, venture capital, real estate, and law. He started his career as a law clerk at WebMD. See, I didn't know that about you, which he left to pursue a career as a venture capitalist and began working for AOL. However, life had other plans for him, and after his father passed suddenly, he returned home to run the family business, a business in which he had no experience and no desire to run. Perfect, right? He didn't know the industry well, nor did he know how to be a good CEO. But it was out of the frying pan into the fire. He knew he couldn't let his family down, so he stepped up, went on a journey to discover just what a CEO does. His journey led him to gaining the knowledge and confidence to run other businesses and eventually write the book we're going to talk a little bit about today. A CEO only does three things. So let's go back into your past and give us a little bit of that backstory as how you got to today.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I graduated college, I went to see my dad and I said, hey, nobody seems to be beating down the door to hire a history major. What do I do? And he said, you go to law school. That's what you do. You go to law school, you run for office, one of the two. So both of those seemed particularly bad choices. So I definitely went to law school and pursued that. And I got into law school and I hated most of it, but I really loved some of it. And the parts that I loved were tax and corporate transactions, and all the things that I thought would sound very dry to me were really fascinating. And I learned a really good skill set from a group of professors who were a little bit iconoclastic in the legal education field. So lawyers, as you well know, we all do, are taught to kill deals, not to make them.
Right.
And Tulane has a corporate law institute, which is very highly regarded. And the professors in that know that deals have to be done. And so we received a different style of education, so much so that when I came out of school and watched how other attorneys behaved, I was aghast at it. I couldn't believe that you would get paid to say this is a deal you shouldn't do and walk away, instead of saying this is a deal that should be done in this manner. Yes. And that sort of thing. So largely, I'm a deal aficionado. I fall in love with deals. I talk deals all day long, even to this day. So that was the benefit that I had from my legal education. Well, when I came out, it was Web 1.0. The big internet bubble, first one was coming to the surface at that point, and nobody was going to practice law in firms. We were getting snapped up by the big five accounting firms at that point. All of the internet startups, all of those kinds of things were coming to the forefront for us and available for us. And so a mentor of mine who I had worked for as a summer clerk took a job with a company called Endeavor Technologies, which 6 weeks after he hired me became WebMD. And so we ran M&A strategy and execution there for a couple of years. And we even were almost close to launching a clone of WebMD called WebDDS as well. It never actually launched as a separate sort of company and that sort of thing. But, we were involved in those kinds of corporate development activities. How do we build the brand better through acquisitions that are strategic in nature? It was a part of the CEO's office. And so I got to be in the room a lot of times with people who were older, more experienced than I was, and who were very good at being CEOs. And I was just able to observe that. So, I've been in the room with Jeff Arnold, who was the CEO and founder of WebMD many times, but also people like Rupert Murdoch, his son, James Murdoch. We negotiated a very impressive four-way deal with those companies that they controlled and that sort of thing. And I was always sort of paying attention to what makes that guy the guy in the room and taking those notes. So after finishing at WebMD, I got some offers to come and do some investing and do it professionally and institutionally through a VC firm in Atlanta. We did. We made 11 investments out of what we would consider a micro fund today. Those 11 investments, every single one of them reached profitable exit, except for one, which is still in business today. So it was an incredible, at bat average on those deals, and something we're really proud of. We were rolling into raising our second fund when some idiots crashed some planes into towers, and the entire world in VC in Atlanta just evaporated. So I found myself sort of popping around a couple of in-house positions. I raised a couple of rounds of capital for some companies, and then ended up in the corporate development arm of Earthlink, which was an ISP, until I was recruited into AOL. I was on the way to accept that job. The moving trucks were coming to pick me up and get all my furniture. And then I got a call from my mom, which you alluded to, and my dad had passed away at 52 very unexpectedly. So then I had to go home and sort of take care of business, which I thought was going to be a temporary assignment. 16 years later, I'm still doing that work. And 2 years ago, we took the family assets and put into a family office. And so I've stepped up to run the family office, and we have general managers running each of the separate business units now. So that's my life today, is figuring out how do we deploy capital into very profitable deals. And then I do a lot of consulting and coaching with business owners and CEOs. When they aren't the business owner, they're the CEO. So we do a lot of that kind of work as well.
Trey, what was the primary business that your family was involved in when your father passed?
Yeah, my grandfather got a sixth grade education, and he wanted to earn a lot of money for his family. So he started knocking on doors and selling life insurance in the 50s. And so he morphed that into one of the biggest voluntary insurance agencies in the country. And so when I came in and took that over, it still had legs in that business, and we used those legs to expand it into multiple lines of business and sign clients in 38 states. So it's an employee benefits consulting and brokerage practice today.
Very good. So let's dive into the book. A CEO only does three things. As I said earlier, because I've lived the lives and still do as a CEO, but I also made the note that many times we wear the title of CEO, but it doesn't really feel good many times. You said it's the most challenging job, 3 times over the next position in a company.
Absolutely.
Because the buck stops with us. We got to make decisions. You talk about making decisions in the book as well. But let's start with the 3 things. Let's, just for benefits of listeners who don't have the book yet, which I would highly advise you pick up the book. Again, it's A CEO Only Does 3 Things. What are those 3 things? And let's do a little bit of a deep dive into those, because they're the crux of the book.
Yeah, for sure. So just to set it up a little bit, the CEO is the only position in the company that doesn't have a job description. You can pull up your receptionist, and you put it on Indeed or wherever you hire people from, and everybody knows what that person is supposed to do, and more importantly, not supposed to do. It's never true for the CEO. So the CEO really runs amok inside his own organization, right? He's fixing things that he shouldn't be fixing. He's launching things that he shouldn't be launching. He's doing work largely that he pays other people to do. on a constant basis. It's a very Tasmanian devil feel to it. And so, in looking at that and wanting to be a good CEO, because I was guilty of all of those sins, and watching other really good CEOs, I was always struck when somebody would say, I don't know, that's not my job. Talk to this person. That's the best person to talk to about that issue. When that comes from a CEO, it isn't shirking a responsibility. Largely, it is a sign of confidence and focus. And that's something that I picked up on early on and wanted to emulate. So when I came into that role for myself, I said to myself, what are the things that a CEO is supposed to do? What do I put in the job description for myself? And what I was doing at that point, David, was hoping to God no one had to come into the job the way that I had to come into it. So, grieving for your dad who's gone, taking care of your mom and your brother and all of his friends and colleagues that worked in the business. And in the meantime, trying to run a business and figure out what the day-to-day job was. So I said to myself, I'll just write a job description, 15-page job description, something like that, to pass on to whoever my successor is. And so that was the genesis of the book. And in doing that and going through the work and processing it, what I found was the most effective CEOs do the things that they can do and no one else can do. And those three things, as far as my lens is concerned, are culture, people, and numbers. So culture is the ethical sort of water that we swim in. It's the agreements, mostly unspoken, between people of what we value most and want to work to make true in the world. People are those people that we select to be on the journey with us. Sometimes that selection is positive, come along with me. And sometimes it's negative, go your own way, but just not with us. And then the numbers are the agreed upon scorecards. Those are the points that we say, this is how we know that our culture and our people are doing the right thing by showing up in the world. And that translates into dollars, yes, but a host of other metrics that are important and largely isolated to be different for each individual business. So culture, people, numbers. Those are the three things that a CEO should do. Not to say he won't do other things, of course, because we all have to-do lists. But those are the three things a CEO can do in a way that other people in the organization cannot bring to fruition.
Trey, through your own experience, obviously, and the fact that you've written the book, you're definitely an authority, a product of the product. You coach and mentor others in the role of ascending to a real CEO position. What do you find are the common errors, mindset or otherwise? You alluded to the fact that many times the CEO just jumps in and does things because that's how he's built, and I don't have time to train or find the right people. I just do it. But where does that come from? Is that a mindset? Is that a belief system? You mentioned confidence. Give me a little bit of just short shrift on how you start with someone who really, really is committed to the process. Where do you have to dig in and start?
Yeah, the first thing that, and we have all of this mapped out, of course, that we sort of sit back and watch and wait for the CEO to get these light bulbs that go off. The first thing is you absolutely have to realize that you putting 1% of your effort behind someone else's 60 to 80% effort is worse than letting that person put 60 to 80% effort in. You're not adding value most of the time you're touching something unless you take it over and really ram it through until it's finished. And to do that, that means you can't do any of the other stuff that is still filling up your inbox and your to-do list. So, that will lead us into a very good conversation about, do you have the right team or do you have the right mindset? Because sometimes those things aren't aligned. And so in accomplishing things, you really have to bring on your team and either decide, are they the ones to do this work or not? If they are, what training and guidance are you giving them to make sure that the end result is good without doing the work yourself? If they are not, then you have to figure out a good way to let those people go find their happiness inside their abilities elsewhere. And you do the work of hiring and replacing that person with a person who is capable of getting you there. What I find, David, is that CEOs are good people. They don't want to tell anybody, you should know how to do this and get out of my office and go do it. Rather, they will time and time again stop what they're doing, put their entire to-do list on hold in order to help out someone who's struggling to get something done. And so if we train our people that they're to do everything 80% of the way and then come ask us for help finishing it, guess what they do? They finish everything 80% of the way and bring us and put a massive thing on our to-do list. So we work with CEOs really to step back from that and to find their own focus back on those three things of culture, people, and numbers.
Are there good methods that you have found, Trey, to help the CEO evaluate the behavioral aspects of certain people, their kind of their profiles, what they're good at? Because I know from many years of being in this position that when you're looking at bringing someone on, of course, everybody puts a good front face on. I mean, there's people that can interview very, very well, of course, and show the bright side and enthusiasm and energy. And boy, that's who I want on my team. But what are some of the ways that a CEO could better filter and have a better chance of having the right people? Never perfect, right? But the better chance of finding people for the right seats, right fit.
One of the big insights that I came to in my career was when I was exposed to the work of a Canadian organizational psychologist whose name was Elliot Jaques. Elliot is like one of these famous guys that nobody ever knows. He coined the term midlife crisis. He wrote a book, David, called The General Theory of Bureaucracy. It's like 800 pages. Wow. You know, nobody's ever read that book. He consulted with Jack Welch, the US Army, NATO. You know, in other words, he tasked himself to figuring out how do large groups of people function. And then he wanted to spend his career boiling that down so that you could figure out individually how do you function best. And so the best learning from him is this concept of time frame. So you and I may think that, oh, I need to run a personality test on somebody in the interview process, and that will tell me everything I need to know about whether they'll be a good fit for the position. Elliot would have, wadded that up and thrown it out the window because what he figured out was that every position, every job has a certain period of time that it takes to do the work of that job, to complete the major task of that job. You hear terms like bricks or flywheel or whatever, but whatever that self-contained excellence is in that position, it takes a certain amount of time to do it. Every person likewise has a perspective level, a time frame level that they can work and produce the optimum result without recourse to additional assistance from other people. And so one of the things that we've done is to put it's in the book and also in our consulting, that we go through organizations and figure out first, what does the position require? Is this a position that takes a year to get through and do everything perfectly? If so, you really should have somebody who can go and work almost independently for a year inside that position. Or is it a position that is a daily or weekly type position? So in my own business, we have a receptionist who knows that there are 12 things that must be done every single day. And she does those 12 things magnificently every single day. She doesn't get bored when the 12 things are the same things every single day. And she feels a sense of accomplishment that she can put a little bow on that level of work that's done every day. Now, if you took me and put me in that job, it would drive me crazy. Sure. I would say, well, I just did that yesterday. I don't want to do the same thing again today. Why don't we re-engineer this so that it looks a little different or something of that nature, right? The same thing happens if you take her and put her in my job, because I don't get the luxury of doing the same thing every single day. The challenges and the problems that come to a CEO are by their nature very different, and they require a little bit different nimbleness mentally to solve problems and that sort of thing, which maybe she was educated to do or not. It's not really about being trained and educated. It is really about finding the right time frame for the person to fit the right time frame for the position. And so I'm a large believer that personality tests are absolutely worthless. Everybody has a personality. You can put people with the wrong personality type in the right incentive structure, and they will make out just fine. Because underlying all of that, you can build positions that benefit people's time frames. And it's something that I just don't think is trained. When I first heard this, it was like the third leg of the stool that I was looking for, as far as considering how to hire and retain people, but then also make them really good at their jobs. And so that's what we do now in our businesses and in our coaching businesses.
If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.